does rock and roll legend Mick Jagger deal with the breakup of his marriage? Well, he hits the road and calls it the No Security Tour.
Last week, Mick Jagger's wife, Jerry Hall, threw in the towel on Mick's wild ways and finally filed papers to end their rocky 8-year marriage.
Jerry Hall finally opens up about the shocking details of her over 20 years relationship with Mick Jagger, frontman of the Rolling Stones. From cheating with several ladies to eventually having a child, Hall is telling it like it is. Join us as we unveil every detail of her revelation. As the lead singer of the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger has become a rock legend for his energy, blues-influenced songs, and stage presence. Jerry Hall's relationship with Jagger was faced with his longing to seduce other women. One time, she referred to him as an intimate predator who replaced substances with intimate pleasure. Early in their affair, she had all these thoughts that he would not be able to stop getting himself involved with other women, but she decided to overlook all of the signs. It got to a point in her life where she decided to tell it all and also get rid of everything, including some of her paintings, as her way of letting go of the past. Her revelation shows just how she was able to transform into a supermodel and the lover of one of the greatest rock stars in the world. Jagger and Hall met in 1977, while Jagger was still married to Bianca Perez Mora, and Hall at that time was dating Roxy Music frontman Bryan Ferry. Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger's union was filled with so many controversies right from the beginning. According to Hall, she revealed that Jagger was relentless in his pursuit and wasn't shy about showing off his attraction to her at that time. She even mentioned an incident that took place at a London dinner, during which he couldn't stay away from her, even though her then fiancé was there at that time. It wasn't long after that, Jagger started visiting her and Ferry's home, and on one occasion, Mick started chasing her around a table, trying to kiss her. While this was going on, Bryan came in and chased him out. Things finally became official between them on May 21st, 1977, when they met at a New York dinner without their partners. They started an affair, and her engagement to Ferry ended a few months later, a year before Bianca Jagger's wife then also filed for divorce in 1978. When the news of how Hall has ended Bianca's marriage to Jagger by getting into an affair with her husband was all over the place, Hall's mother Marjorie insisted that Hall wasn't a homewrecker, the way most publications made her look like the Jezebel who ended Jagger and Bianca's marriage. As usual, this is Mick Jagger's way. Ferry joined the list of famous men who lost out to Jagger in the battle for a woman. Jagger and Hall began a thing just after he invited them both out to dinner with the express intention of hitting on Ferry's fiancée. It wasn't long after falling for Jagger that Hall would soon come to learn that even marriage itself was not enough to keep him at a place. Jagger was still officially married to his first wife, Bianca, at the time. Nonetheless, he moved Hall, who was just 20 years old at that time, into a Paris flat, then into their suite of rooms in the Beaux-Arts apartment building. What was Hall's relationship with Mick Jagger like? Let's get into Jerry Hall's side of the story. The early days of Jagger and Hall's relationship were in a particular era, a time when having intimate knowledge of someone, substance use, and rock and roll was all around. Their relationship itself was filled with infidelity and drama, and the whole event that played out in their relationship would always stand as a marker of what that era looked like. While Mick Jagger has only been married once, which is his marriage to Bianca, although they were only married for 7 years, he had plenty of other relationships. One of the most notable relationships was his romantic relationship with Jerry Hall, partly because it lasted for over 20 years, and because it was filled with a whole lot of drama. It wasn't long after they both moved into the apartment that Jagger started flirting with several beautiful models and groupies who made their way to their quarters when she was away on modeling projects. In one instance, Jagger got involved with the 18-year-old daughter of his friend, John Phillips, of the Mamas and the Papas. This event took place just when Hall was away on a shoot in South Africa on January 1978. Then Jagger and Phillips were present at a party. Suddenly Jagger, who was 34 years old at that time, quietly disappeared in the lift to his apartment in the company of Phillips's teenage daughter, Mackenzie, who had arrived at the party with her father. By the time Phillips was banging on Mick's door asking for his young daughter, Mackenzie was already in Mick's bed. She was just one of the many women with whom Jagger betrayed Hall. It was also revealed that another famous woman, whom he had an affair with behind Jerry's back, was fellow supermodel Janice Dickinson. Jagger and Dickinson began an 8-month affair after their dance in a club in late 1981. During Jagger's affair with Dickinson, it was recorded that Hall called her and warned her to stay away from Jagger, else she was going to use the gun in her purse. According to Dickinson, when this incident took place, she didn't take what Hall said seriously about shooting her, but she was a bit disconnected from Jagger since he was with Hall. She also mentioned that besides, she is not that type of woman, a home wrecker. As such, she decided to call it a split with Jagger a couple of months later. Jagger was constantly cheating on Hall, but despite the singer's unending love for attracting the opposite gender, he has long been plagued by rumors that he is not blessed in the bedroom when it comes to intimacy. One time, Keith Richards somehow mentioned that Jagger's ex-girlfriend, Marianne Faithfull, had confided in him about Jagger's alleged physical shortcomings when it comes to intimacy. On several occasions, Hall would always find women's clothing and jewelry in the bedrooms of their 4 homes. Among all of the many affairs Jagger had, Hall was particularly scared of his affair with Carla Bruni, who was 25 years younger than Mick. Hall was extremely scared that she would take Jagger away from her for good. Some people would say that only a wrecker gets extremely scared of being wrecked. About 4 months after falling for Bruni, Jagger still got married to Hall in a Hindu ceremony in Bali on November 21st, 1990. By that time, the couple already had 2 of their 4 children together, Elizabeth and James, after which they went on to have their other 2 kids, Georgia May and Gabriel. When Jerry Hall discovered Jagger's affair with Bruni, she reacted angrily and also went ahead to confront Bruni in the lobby of a Paris hotel, where the 2 women had a heated argument that ended with Jerry Hall almost getting physical with Carla Bruni screaming that she should keep her hands off her man. Bruni, whose parents were quite rich, reacted to Hall by saying that she had no class and elegance. One time, Hall had an argument with Jerry over Bruni. During the argument, Jagger couldn't withstand her complaints. All of a sudden, he stormed out. Hall, who was lonely without him, penned a note begging him to come home. It spoke volumes about how much hold he had over her. In fact, the contents of the notes had Hall telling him that she was truly sorry for being jealous, and going forward she wants him to have his freedom, and she won't mind if he gets involved with other girls. She went further to mention that she does not want him to change at all, but all she just wants is to be his #1 girl. A few weeks later, just when it looked like Hall had managed to free Jagger from Bruni's grip, just a day after daughter Georgia May was born on January 12th, 1992, Jagger flew to Thailand for a holiday with Bruni. Aside from gross infidelity, the moment Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger began their affair, extreme love for substances played a major role in their union. According to Hall, Jagger was honest about his substance use the same way she was also honest about her disapproval. When the rocker admitted to this, and even told her that he had used a particular substance every day for an entire year sometime in the 60s, she gave him an ultimatum. While narrating the incident, she mentioned that she was disgusted, and then told him that they couldn't be together if he should continue taking those substances. And so he did just that. In one instance, Jagger also mentioned that he couldn't live with Hall after she stopped taking burning substances. At that point, he had to give her an ultimatum too, to either start taking the burnt substances or he'd be leaving the relationship. However, his willpower did not extend to monogamy. For Hall, she was glad she could take him into staying away from substances, unknown to her that they had been replaced by intimacy and an unending longing for other women. She mentioned how most times she would be home with their kids and would be forced to read about his alleged misconduct from the media. Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger's relationship was faced with so much breaking and making up. Their first split was reported back in 1982, claiming that Hall had fallen for businessman and horse breeder Robert Sangster. Although during this time she didn't address the rumored infidelity, Hall did confirm her and Jagger's breakup. Other cases followed from both sides, but there was no doubt that Jagger and Hall couldn't keep away from each other for too long. Another split also occurred on July 1992, just months after Hall gave birth to their 3rd child. This time, Jagger's ongoing romance with Bruni was the major cause. Hall even mentioned that they might get a divorce. Well, eventually, it never happened. Jagger and Hall reconciled that same year. According to her, they've certainly had their share of bad times, and whenever 2 people stay together for a long time, there's definitely going to be those issues. As usual, the rumors of infidelity still continued. Then in 1997, they had their fourth child. Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger did not always see eye to eye when they were together, but the two always agreed on the importance of family. As a couple, they had 4 children together, starting with Elizabeth Jagger, who was born in 1984, James Jagger, who followed in 1985, then Georgia May Jagger, who was born in 1992, and Gabriel Jagger in 1997. After years of being on and off with their long relationship, Jerry Hall decided to finally file for a divorce. Let's get into the details of how this turned out. Prior to this time, she had mentioned overlooking Mick Jagger's alleged affairs for years. There were some things she simply couldn't get over. One of such things was his absence. She mentioned that she was heartbroken, most especially during the period when she was to give birth to their 4th child. Jagger wasn't home at all through this period. That aside, she sincerely knew it was time to leave the relationship when rumors started going around that Jagger had an affair with model Luciana Gimenez Morad during the Rolling Stones tour, and that she was pregnant for Jagger. According to Hall, this was the final straw. She had to call for a divorce. She also went on to explain that she had been tempted to leave him many times, but had to tell herself to put up with his infidelities. However, having a child with another woman was too much for her to bear. Hall mentioned further how their relationship left her feeling backed into a corner, to the point where she forgave severally, to the point that it wasn't healthy at all. She also added that she did love Mick very much, but after years of being hopeful, she finally decided to give up. Interestingly, by May 1999, Morad gave birth to a son, and a DNA test was done that proved that Jagger was indeed the father. Morad had to apologize to Hall. In doing that, she sent a letter to her, but somehow included that she never saw herself as a homewrecker. Well, it was later disclosed that when Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger finally called it quits, they didn't technically get a divorce. They both announced the end of their union through a joint statement issued on July 1999, which confirmed that Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall had formally agreed to separate after more than 2 decades as a couple and to obtain an annulment. Many people wondered why they got an annulment and not a divorce. Well, it was said that when they tied the knot, they actually didn't file the right paperwork. That, in turn, meant they technically were not married, and so they couldn't actually get a divorce. That's because a divorce basically ends a marriage, while an annulment, on the other hand, shows that no valid marriage ever existed in the first place. Hall and Jagger at this point did what they needed to do to separate and agreed to the annulment, while putting in mind the needs of their 4 kids. Although Hall saw this annulment as being rude after spending over 20 years with him. Well, what did their personal life look like following their split? Following the incident of their split, both Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall didn't waste any time getting back on the dating wing. While Jagger went all out for late fashion designer Loren Scott and then ballet dancer Melanie Hamrick, Hall, on the other hand, also got linked to a few high-profile figures, from Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen to film producer George Wad, then Rupert Murdoch, in the summer of 2015. Their love story was followed by an engagement in January 2016, after which they eventually got married in March of the same year. Legally, this was Hall's first marriage. Following the news of Hall's marriage, Jagger was not too pleased. To him, it was odd seeing that Rupert Murdoch was going to become a part of his extended family. In the end, Hall and Murdoch's relationship also ended in divorce in July 2022. Although they were separated, Hall took the time to acknowledge Jagger's role as a father to their children, despite all of the drama and unhealthy incidents that took place in the relationship. At some point, Hall had some generous things to say about Jagger. She mentioned that he was the most fabulous ex-husband, but aside from that, he's a sick and addictive womanizer who made her very unhappy. While speaking, she mentioned that Mick Jagger's qualities as a father are highly commendable, as she went ahead to praise his involvement in their children's lives, highlighting his dedication to helping the kids with some of their homework. That wasn't all. She also commended his love for history and how much he enjoyed most of their outdoor activities with the family, such as bike rides, walks with the dogs, and playing cricket. Hall's acknowledgement paints a picture of Jagger not just as a rock star with a complicated personal life and unending longing for ladies, but also as a committed and caring father who is willing to share in the lives of his children. For someone like Hall, this is quite special since she grew up in a household where her father wasn't present. Hall was one of the 5 daughters of a decorated war hero, John Hall. He was a troublesome father who would disappear for days, leaving her mother and 5 small children with no food. According to Hall, there was a time when her father attempted to take his life after gambling away their home in a poker game. She mentioned that her dad ended their entire existence by first gambling their house and farm away. Then, as if that wasn't enough, filled with guilt and shame, he tried to take his life himself. Unfortunately, he was no better at that than he was at poker. The only thing he succeeded in doing was breaking almost every bone in his body and losing a kidney, leaving her mother with 5 children to raise, no home, and a husband destined to spend a long time in hospital. Seeing Jagger being there for their kids was no doubt one of the best things he did in their relationship and time together. As they've grown up, all 4 have tried to make it in entertainment. The eldest child, Elizabeth, has taken a path in acting and modeling and is an outspoken activist for women's rights, while James Jagger is taking his acting career seriously and already has some credits to his name. Aside from that, he also plays in a band and is on the board of directors for Project Zero, a nonprofit working to protect and restore oceans. Out of all the kids Jagger and Hall had together, perhaps the most recognizable face is that of Georgia May, who has made a career out of modeling and has successfully gathered lots of followers on her social media pages. While Gabriel has been the most reserved, he has somehow been off the spotlight even though he began modeling in 2016. In an interview, he mentioned that his sister had convinced him to do it. However, his real passion is dark poetry. As for Luciana Gimenez, her life also took its own interesting turns following her affair with Jagger and the birth of their son. She went on to marry Marcelo de Carvalho, who was a prominent figure in the Brazilian media industry at that time. This career path marked her transition from modeling to a notable personality in the Brazilian media industry. By 2018, they also got divorced. As for Bruni, she eventually got married to Nicolas Sarkozy in February 2008, which would see her become the First Lady of France. For Jagger, his unending affairs were obviously not going to come to an end. A significant chapter in his personal life began when he met Loren Scott, an American fashion designer. The meeting between Jagger and Scott marked the start of a relationship that would last over a decade, becoming one of the most stable and significant relationships in Jagger's later life. However, between the period of 2000 and 2001, Jagger was in a relationship with the English model Sophie Dahl. Jagger's relationship with fashion designer Loren Scott started from 2001 until her passing in 2014. It was a tragic event for Jagger, as Scott passed on by taking her own life. She left her entire estate, which is estimated at about $9 million to Mick Jagger. Following her demise, Jagger set up the Loren Scott Scholarship at London's Central St. Martin's College. Jagger and Scott's relationship looked like it was actually much different from all of his other relationships, including his relationship with Hall. They formed a connection that quickly evolved into a deep and committed relationship. For 13 years, Mick Jagger and Scott shared a life that by many accounts was one of the relationships he had with less drama, as compared to his long-term affair with Jerry Hall. Following Scott's demise, Jagger got into a relationship with American ballet dancer Melanie Hamrick. By 2016, Hamrick gave birth to their son. Prior to this time, Jagger's father, Basil Joe Jagger, had passed on due to pneumonia on the 11th of November 2006 at the age of 93. At that time, the Rolling Stones were on a tour. Jagger flew to Britain to see his father before returning the same day to Las Vegas, where he was to perform that night, after being informed his father's condition was improving. The show went ahead as scheduled. Despite Jagger learning of his father's eventual passing that afternoon, Jagger's friends said that the show going on was what his father would have wanted. Jagger called his father the greatest influence in his life. Well, for Jagger, the only point concerning Mick Jagger's influence over young people that doctors and psychologists agreed on was that it wasn't under any circumstances harmless. According to some reports, even Elvis Presley, at his most extreme nature, was not able to display such power when it comes to being physical and intimate with ladies. It was said that while Presley made girls scream, he did not have Jagger's ability to make men feel uncomfortable. Jagger was likened to a male ballet dancer, coupled with the fact that Jerry Hall's relationship with him came with so much drama that she went as far as granting him consent to cheat with other ladies. There's no doubt that Jerry Hall's candid revelations about her unhealthy relationship with Mick Jagger offer a clear hint into the private life of one of rock's most controversial figures. From the relationships, fame, and wild parties to bitter betrayals and heartbreak, Jerry Hall's story is a timeless reflection of how tender love and fame can be. Over the years, one aspect of their relationship that has raised questions among fans is the fact that many regard Jerry Hall as the actual homewrecker who left her engagement and intruded into Jagger's home, knowing fully that he was already married. By the time she got served the same dish, she was seen warning the other ladies to stay off her man. But many would wonder if she ever thought of the fact that Jagger also cheated on his wife with her. Not only that, he eventually left his wife and got married to her. But perhaps what is most striking about Hall's revelations is the raw honesty with which she speaks about her experiences. Hall's account of Jagger's power over women is particularly striking. She paints a picture of a man with maybe a supernatural magnet that draws ladies, including herself, towards him. Also, the stories of other men getting scared of Jagger at parties and intimidated by Jagger's presence around their ladies make their love story really fascinating. In the end, Jerry Hall's experiences with Mick Jagger stand as a reminder of how complex love, fame, intimacy, and ambition can be. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.